Yeah.
Okay. Great. So we're on Baruch Shamar, page 16. Let's try to finish it today. So, opening of, we have lots of drop-ins, old people, new people. Let's go around, say our name. I'm Avi.
Shep. Norm.
Rachel.
Norm.
Other Norm.
Bernie. John. Mike.
Terry.
Debbie.
Meyer, not Mayor. And we have a minion, so we'll try to finish on time, and we'll try to say Kaddish Rabbanan. So, we're entering the second section of the Siddur. All this is review, which is Psukei de Zimra. The first section, Birchot HaShachar, we kind of got grounded in ourselves in the morning. The second section, Baruch Psukei de Zimra, Psalms of Praise, which is mostly from the book of Psalms, but not entirely, is intended to get us kind of in the mood to daven. So it's meant to appeal to the our emotional state. And we have a bracha at the beginning and a bracha at the end, just like Hallel. Okay, we have an intro bracha and then an outro bracha. But before the intro bracha, we have this poem, which is the first half of the page. So again, to us, Baruch Shamar, we recite it as one prayer, okay? But it's really two entirely different things. And we talked about this poem 2 weeks ago. I think we never got back to it last week. I don't know why. So I'm just going to zip through it. And I think this is meant to be a statement of theology. As we roll into Psukei de Zimra, Psalms of Praise of God, this is a statement of theology. And then let's look at all the things in it, and I'm going to ask what's there and what's not there. If you were going to make a theological statement about, God is this or God does that, what would we, what's here that we would expect, and what might we expect that's not here? Okay? So, blessed is the one who spoke and the world became. Baruch Hu. Baruch Hoseh Breshit. Blessed is the one who makes Breshit, literally, who does creation. Baruch Omer V'oseh. Blessed is the one who speaks and does. And we talked about how this is clearly a reference to Breshit chapter 1, where over and over God creates how, with what verb? What's the verb where it says that God made this and God made that? It's Vayomer, right? So it's not Breshit chapter 2, which is about fashioning from the earth and blowing life into us and stuff like this. Breshit chapter 1 is the more abstract version of creation, where God just spaketh and it comes into being. Okay? So blessed is the one who spoke and made, or made through speaking. Baruch Gozer Kayem. I'm going to put a question mark here. Okay? Blessed is the one who decrees and carries it out. I'm going to put the question mark. We'll come back to it and say, what does that mean in this context? Baruch Merachem al haaretz, Baruch Merachem al habriot. Blessed is the one who has compassion for the world. Blessed is the one who has compassion for the creatures. So the world suggesting the universe and creatures suggesting the living things, subset, okay? And we've said this many times. Merachem comes as a verb from what word and what idea? Womb, rechem, right? So, and we've commented numerous times about the irony of all the powers of the deities getting folded into the one monotheistic God in the Bible. And so the goddess power of creativity and generativity and fertility also gets folded into the male God. So the word for God's rachamim really means womb feeling. God has womb feeling. And, of course, it fits nicely here, because what have we been talking about in Baruch Shamar? Well, to what?
To the world.
Creation, right? So God speaks, right? And then God, usually we translate as has compassion on the world, but another way of saying that is, of translating could be God has womb feeling for the world, or God births the world. I don't want to claim that mirachem in biblical or rabbinic Hebrew actually means to give birth to. I'm not claiming that. Right? That's not how you would say giving birth. but there's a hint in the use of this word, right? What's the relationship of God to the world? So first of all, we said God spoke and made the world. And here, the relationship of God to the world is one of compassion or womb feeling. Again, compassion is a fancy schmancy English word that comes from Latin. I don't know what it means, right? But here we just says womb feeling. So blessed is the one who has womb feeling for the creatures, or who wombed the creatures. That's a stretch, but I think it's hinted at in the use. Yep.
Isn't it active? It's an active.
Lirachem. Yeah, it's a PL.
Right, but
It doesn't. Go ahead.
It's, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just.
So, but God did something, right? It's God doing something, whether that means acting with compassion or having maternal feeling or birthing. But birthing is only hinted at. I don't want to say that Merachim means birthing. Baruch Mishalem Sachar Tov Lireav. Blessed is the one who pays a good recompense to those who revere God. So it's sort of like, which one of these is not like the other one? That one is definitely not like the others. Because the others up until now are about creation. Right? Except for maybe Gozerum Kayem, which I put a question mark next to. So we're going to come back to that. Baruch Chai La'ad V'Kayam Lanetzach. Blessed is the one who lives forever and exists for eternity. Something like that. Alive for eternity and exists forever. Baruch Podeh Umatzil. Again, this one is somewhat different than the creative ones. Blessed is the one who redeems and saves, rescues and saves. Baruch Shemo. So if I said to you, well, this looks sort of like a poem in which the poet wants to, since it's before Birchot Psukei de Zimra, one would infer that the poet wants to kind of foreshadow what the themes are going to be in the Psalms of Psukei de Zimra. And I asked you to summarize this not in one sentence, but in a complex sentence involving commas. What would you say about this? This tells us that God is what? The poet is saying that Hashem is
Creator.
Pardon?
Creator.
Creator. What else?
Merciful.
Merciful or compassionate or whatever verb.
Universal or universalist.
Universalist. So that's one of the things that is missing. What is missing here?
Children of Israel.
There's no Israel. There's no splitting of the Red Sea.
There's no Torah either.
Right. And there's no Torah either. By the way, we do have words that are frequently associated with Israel and the splitting of the Red Sea. And what are those words? There are words in here that we would expect, you might think, Podeh Umatzil, right? So normally, when we're talking about Podeh Umatzil, if it's in the Psalms, we're talking about God actually saved me from some jam, but those are the words that we commonly use when we're talking about taking us out of Egypt. Who is Urayav usually? Yeah, but who are they? Let's be practical. Who are the ones who revere God? Us, right? B'nai Israel. So, again, you could say something about Israel, the Jewish people, is maybe hinted at here, but then is clearly not. By the way, when we read the Psalms, what are the Yereim doing, those who revere God? What are they usually doing in the Psalms? Praise. Where? Where do they praise? They come to the temple, they offer praise and thanksgiving. So we have all these Psalms that say that. But this is clearly, again, I read it as intentionally omitted. So the things that we generally would come to expect, if I said, give me a full theology of what the Jewish people believe in a succinct way, okay? And we have lots of other prayers that are litanies of all the things that God did for us, and it usually includes, took us out of Egypt, and Dayenu, right? Gave us the Torah, brought us to the land, gave us the temple. All those things are absent, with the result being that, as Norm says, this introductory poem is very universalistic. There's nothing, I don't say it's not Jewish, because these are Jewish, but there's nothing in it that limits it to the Jewish people or to history. By the way, another thing that's missing, Baruch mishalem sachar tov l're'ah. Blessed is the one who pays a good recompense to those who revere him.
There's no punishment.
What is frequently the next line?
Punishment.
Right. So frequently the next line is God pays good to those who revere him, but recompenses the wicked. Okay, we have that in so many Psalms. So again, that's missing also. Okay, that's the common thing that we would expect is the flip side of that. Right? Most places where it says God pays good, it also says and God pays bad. Everyone gets their due. So that's missing too. So there's no punishment. Okay, there's nothing particularly nationalistic or tribal.
No omniscience.
Pardon?
No omniscience.
There's no omniscience, so there's no Torah, there's no land or temple. Very interesting. So the opening poem that the poet wrote, or that the group mind selected, as I guess I'm going to call it really the preamble to Birchot HaShachar, because technically Birchot HaShachar doesn't really start till you say the blessing. It would be as if I could just give you an analogy so you get it sort of structurally, literarily. We have Hallel, which opens and closes with a blessing and contains psalms of praise. And we have Baruch Psuke de Zimra, which is psalms of praise, which opens and closes with a blessing. It would be as if someone inserted a little poem before Hallel to foreshadow what's going to happen in Hallel. Does that make sense? Or like we have now in the conservative Shabbat morning Siddur, we have that little poem inserted before Nishmat, right? And the different editions of the Siddurim, there are different editions of it, but it's a little poetic, focusing device, okay, before you actually get to the davening. It's a preface to the davening. So whereas Psuke de Zimra is to get you into the mood to daven, the first half of Baruch Shamar is to get you in the mood to do Psuke de Zimra.
And you say it doesn't start till the Baruch Hu, or
I'm saying Psuke de Zimra, the Psalms of Praise, right, starts and ends with a bracha to demarcate it, and that bracha actually starts at the second half of the page. It does not start until the second half of the page.
Down below here.
Yeah. Michael?
Yes, it also sounds like a mini listing of attributes of God.
Well, yes. Yes. Correct. Agreed. That was my point, that this is the theology of who do we think God is? This God who we're about to praise in Baruch Shamar. What is this God? Who is this God? This is the answer. Creator, kind, compassionate, rewarding, eternal. We do have eternal again. Pardon? Supportive. Okay, so in context, then we have to. Let's go back to the question mark. Try to resolve it. Baruch gozer kayem. So usually when we say God is gozer, decreeing, again, it's interesting. There's use of a number of words here that are used elsewhere very commonly in a conventional way, but then defies our expectation because they're used here not in a conventional way, just like the Podeo Matzil, right? Podeo Matzil, but it's not B'nai Yisrael splitting of the Yam Suf. So what is gozer usually about? God usually decrees. What does that evoke in your memory banks about? God makes a decree. How does that usually used?
Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, Rosh Hashanah, which means rewards and punishments. What else? I heard another mutter.
Roa Gezerah.
Say again?
Roa Gezerah.
Okay, Roa HaGezerah, the bitter decree.
Yeah.
So decrees are usually
Negative.
more so than positive. It's usually not the king decrees an amnesty for everyone, yay, everyone goes free, no one pays taxes. It's usually the king decrees, right? Something that's a severe decree, Roa HaGezerah, right? But that's clearly not what it is in this context. I'm not sure what it is in this context. What do you think it is in this context?
Well, as it relates to Mekayim, right? So it's like decree is like, something that is, like you said, was from the word cutting. Right?
Yeah.
And Mekayim is making in existence.
Yes.
They tend to be comparisons to each other, don't they?
Yeah.
Two words.
So, but then how does it fit in this? What does it mean? If I were just asking you to translate very broadly, idiomatically, but make it fit within this poem.
It's like Shamar. It's a repetition of
Oh,
Shamar.
create.
Shamar about what?
Creation.
Right.
Right.
So it's about creation. in this context, it seems like it's about creation. Again, it's very unusual, because normally Gozer Kayem means God says, I'm going to reward someone, or I'm going to punish someone, or I'm going to send you down to Egypt, or rescue you from Egypt, or something like that. Those are the kinds of things that a Gezerah usually is. And then God executes that. God makes a promise, and then God executes it. A promise about something that's going to happen to some group of people. Okay? And then God carries out that decree. But it's clearly used here very differently from that. It seems to be in context of creation, meaning God decrees creation or existence, right? A little bit like Omer ve'oseh, right? Gozer is like Omer, right? Decreeing is like saying, and Mikayem is like Oseh, it's doing. So I just want to point out it's an unusual, I don't know if it's meant to be ironic, but it's an unusual use of Gozer and Kayem to be not at all about what Gozer is usually about. No one said the world, I can't think of another place where it says God created the world where the word that's used for that is that it's a gezerah, it's a decree. And usually in rabbinic literature, decree is about a reward or a punishment or a historical event or something like that that's going to happen.
But we refer to him
Yeah.
as a king later in the same prayer, so there's
Yeah.
a relationship to a decree coming from the king
Yes.
who's a god. That's
Yes,
making-
yes, but it's a decree about something
Right.
that we don't usually expect to have the verb decree about.
But it does tie in, as you say, to the first chapter of Bereshit, because there it's always Vayomer, he said.
Yeah.
And he said it's like a decree.
Yes,
He orders
agreed.
this, it's done.
Right,
By
and
his
right,
word.
and then it seems in context, Baruch Omer ve'oseh, Baruch Gozer and Kayem, in a nice poetic way is parallel. Yes, agreed. So I'm just pointing out that it's a very unusual use of Gozer. So what's interesting about this poem is we have a number of things. Gozer, Mishalem Sachar Tov, but no punishment. Okay, and Hodeo Matzil, but without any mention of the Jewish people at all. So we have a number of phrases that are very familiar to us from other places in the Siddur or in rabbinic literature, but their usual so maybe their associations are there in the back of your mind, but it's not at all explicit. So this view of the deity rolling into Psuke de Zimra, who is God, what is God? God is creator, compassionate, protector, eternal. It's a very positive and universalistic view. So this is some person's poem, we don't know who, about the introduction, the preamble to Psuke de Zimra, which really starts with the bracha at the bottom of the page. Tal, and then
So if this is
yeah.
in many ways attributes,
Yes.
why was this chosen instead of maybe Yigdal, which is very straight on its praise and it's what God has done and
But also the Torah.
the
right.
Torah exactly.
Well,
So why
That's
pick
kind
the,
of my point. I mean, you have to answer that question, or I mean, maybe Yigdal wasn't around when it was written, but that's not the point. The point is that someone wanted to have a preamble, right? I'm going to call this preamble to. We're going to praise God, so I'm going to have a preamble first. I'm going to give you a little poem in which I tell you all about God. Okay. And all about God does not include punishment, does not include the Jewish people, does not include history, unless you consider creation to be history. But what we think of as all the things of human history. So many of the things that we associate, or Torah, or Eretz Yisrael, or the Temple. So many of the things that are commonly associated. You're saying, if I picked some other typical Jewish statement, classic Jewish statement of what God is and does, this wouldn't necessarily be it. And that's kind of my point. My point is, well, that's interesting, isn't it? That it's not Yigdal, or something like Yigdal. That it is this, that has nothing about the Jewish people, nothing about the Red Sea, nothing about the difference between Jews and the other nations. By the way, again, and we find all of those themes amply in Psuke Zimra, right? They are totally present in the Psalms.
Right. Right.
And yet the poet who wrote this poem, I guess I would just say, ignores them, right? And thus has an introductory poem which is very, I will just call it creative. It's about God as creator, universalistic, and compassionate, with none of that other stuff. So that's pretty interesting. And yet the poet uses a number of buzzwords which commonly are connected to that other stuff,
Right.
but doesn't then spell any of that out. Okay, so is that an intentional? Is it a hinting at it? We know what you think. We know when you hear Podem Matzil what you're thinking about. You're thinking about, leaving Egypt and all the times God protected us. Or is it kind of an intentional ignoring, omission, suppression? Suppression goes a little too far. Okay. Page
Gives us
13.
flexibility.
Page 13.